Good morning and good afternoon to you, wherever you may be as you tune in today. And thank you for joining us. For those who have joined us for the first time, this webinar series is focused on HR and workplace topics with a lens of culture, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and sustainability. I'm Sonia Sapaban, CEO of OurOffice, where we help organizations with the process, expertise, data, and technology you need to build a more inclusive workplace. First, I want to thank Kelly Laffey, Mark Minnie, and Stephanie Love for joining us today. We'll ask them to introduce themselves in a moment. But before we get to the meat of this conversation, let's make sure you're familiar with some logistics. So here we go. You are all familiar with the Zoom webinar tool, and this is an interactive webinar, so please use the chat function to provide your comments. We also welcome questions throughout the webinar. This is the benefit of calling in live, so you can put it in the Q&A if you would. Also, please note this session is being recorded and will be available after the webinar on the OurOffice events page at ouroffice.io/events. That's again, ouroffice.io/events. Last but not least, this webinar is approved for SHRM and HRCI for recertification credits. We'll share the activity codes on the last slide, so please hold on for that. Now, just a few stats to put things in perspective before we begin our conversations with our great panelists here. So according to a recent study, through 2022, 75% of organizations with decision-making teams reflecting a diverse and inclusive culture will exceed their financial goals. And gender diverse and inclusive teams outperformed other less inclusive teams by 50% on average. There's been a lot of this kind of data in the past, you've heard, I'm sure, but this is new data, the most recent we could find. Now, we're also aware of the tight labor market in the last couple of years, but the demand for the Chief Diversity Officer or the CDO role has exceeded really all expectations. And there are many new providers for DEI consulting and training where billions are spent, as many organizations have been launching efforts to build a more inclusive workplace to hire and retain a diverse workforce. But for many organizations, the problem is results have fallen short of their expectations, or worse, they can't even tell if they're improving or not, and have trouble broadly engaging all their employees. In many cases, this leads to burnout and high turnover rates of those CDOs and other DEI champions and team members who are trying to do the work, but after a bit, they kind of get discouraged and maybe they move from those roles. Today, we're lucky to have three thought leaders from different industries with us to help us look at how technology may be the answer to accelerating and having more success, just as many other fields have benefited from technology. So we'll hear some practical examples of how their teams are using technology to do three things. So first of all, plan, communicate, and execute on some key objectives, as you would with any other initiatives that you might have. The second thing, engaging their whole team in an inclusive environment so all individuals can belong and be productive. And then thirdly, measure what matters to see if they're improving or need adjustments along the way. So these three things, planning, engaging the whole team, and measuring what matters are critical really for any business initiative, right? Today, we're going to talk about how that applies to when you're working on your workplace culture and diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and how technology can help with that. Okay, so with that, first let me start by asking everyone to please introduce yourselves. And as you introduce yourself with your company name, your industry, maybe size of your company and your role, please also tell us why your organization and you personally are committed to building a more inclusive workplace in your organization. And we can start, shall we start with Kelly?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Laffey. I'm a partner at Stubbs, Alderton, and Markleys. We are a full service regional law firm in Los Angeles, California. We would be considered mid-size with about 40 attorneys. We started partnering with our office. I want to say it's been about a year, maybe a little bit over a year now. And, diversity, equity, and inclusion has definitely been kind of very important to our organization for a long time, but we just never had the tools to really address it. It's been, this kind of elephant in the room. We know it's a problem, but how do we address it? We don't really know kind of what to do, especially of our smaller size. It just felt like all of the resources available were not really geared towards an organization like ours. And so it's been a great partnership with our office because they really cater to all sizes of company. And so, yes, in terms of why it's important to our organization, I think it's in the statistics Sonia just cited, but we know that having an inclusive workplace makes employees happier, makes staff happier, makes people do better work and be better at their jobs. And so the proof is really in the pudding. For me personally, I am one of 2 women partners in my firm. And so I felt like a personal obligation to become a better advocate for women, on the personal level, but also, candidly, I felt very kind of called in by the events of 2020. And not that I was completely opposed to these things prior to that, but I did feel like those events really did call me in more specifically to help minorities and especially Black people and people of color. So that's me in a nutshell. Looking forward to today's conversation.
Thank you so much for sharing that, especially your personal connection. A lot has happened in the last couple of years, and I think a lot of people feel differently about many different important issues. So thank you for sharing that. Mark, would you like to go next?
I can. First of all, thanks for the opportunity to join the panelists in this discussion. The technology is something that's near and dear to my heart as well as we go through this. Again, my name is Mark Minnie. I'm with AM General. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer at AM General, so I have oversight of human resources, labor relations, organizational development, and our information systems. AM General, 24 years. We started using our office in 2019, so we've been along for the journey for a few years now. AM General, we are a manufacturer, a full service provider in the aerospace defense industry. We have operations in Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, roughly about 700 some employees across those facilities. And we manufacture the iconic Humvee that's used in militaries across the globe. We've also done commercial vehicles over the year. We did the H2 for GM and the original Hummer H1. So a lot of automotive experience. I think for us as a company in 2019, when we started a little bit of this journey, was to some of the points that you made early on about the ability of how the right group dynamics and the engagement can really influence performance. We believe that, we see it, and it's our goal to really leverage that and be a differential in how we perform. For me personally, having started my career and spent my entire career in HR, HR is, in my experience, has been predominantly a female-dominated field. And having 2 daughters, I think I've seen both professionally and personally how, the engagement and group dynamic can really influence and impact how the level of engagement and success that people have. I always think back, I was, not to go too long on this, but I always think back, we did junior achievement earlier in my career, and we always did this little program. And I think Sonia speaks to a little bit what you were talking about. We'd have the students do the exercise where you're stranded and you had to decide, prioritize what you needed to survive. And you take the students through the exercise individually, and then you take them together as a group. And almost every time the group scores would outperform the individual scores. And so me personally, from a leadership style, I've always taken away from that you have to have the right group engaged. You get a group engaged and where everybody feels they can collaborate and contribute, you will always get a better outcome. And so for us, that's a key importance for us, why we're really driving this culture at AM General.
Thank you so much, Mark. I have to just on a personal note, just say that back in 2019, when we started on this journey together, and you really were leading way out front in terms of applying technology and your vision of what the workplace culture and DEI could be. I remember you talking about it as a competitive advantage, and and how critical it was. And in the first week, you got so much into it. I remember we came and met up with you in person, and you had gone into it. And the first week you came into the launch meeting and you said, "Oh, we've had ROI. I have this thing that I discovered as I was looking through the platform." And you mentioned, some policy about your hiring process that you were going to improve upon as a result in the first week. So I really appreciate it. I want to just highlight how you took a risk, right? At that time on a new product from a new company, and it's really, I think it's been a pleasure working with you and your team. So thank you for that. And Stephanie, last but not least, please, would you like to just intro yourself?
Sure. I'm Stephanie Love. I'm the Director of Talent Management here at Aspiration. Aspiration is a climate fintech, so we sort of straddle two areas. From a consumer perspective, we're a financial technology firm, banking products, et cetera. But from an enterprise or business perspective, we are most suitably a sustainability company, right? The fight against the climate change, et cetera. We've got about 400 plus employees to date. And I would say why DEI is important to us. We're a B Corp, we're ESG, which stands for environmental social governance. So it just simply is our DNA, right? We built this company with a mindset that we want to do things differently, right? So it is a business objective. Not only that, I've seen firsthand that more diverse perspectives, more diverse people lead to much better decision-making. I grew up in recruiting, and I've seen this firsthand here as well. We've hired a bunch of people from a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different states and a lot of different ideologies. And it has led to such a robust cultural dialogue internally. And that's really important. And it doesn't just go, I guess it goes beyond just happiness and productivity. It really does align with who we are and what we're trying to do in the world. So I'm happy to be here and excited to get started.
Yeah, thank you so much as well, Stephanie. I know you're also growing very fast. You're one of those growing firms, and you do a lot of good with your product as well. So thank you for that. So let's get started. I think everybody can tell that this is an amazing panel across a variety of different types of companies and industries. No matter what you are trying to do in business, my experience is that you have to have an upfront plan, right? And many people now are working on plans, and really some of the data shows that a lot of times the issue is on executing or getting everybody on the same page, aligned with that plan. And that's, as you all know, it's part of the first letter in this ACT process that we talk about is about alignment. So important to assess and align everyone. So I want to talk about the upfront planning. And Kelly, could you please start us off by talking to how the technology, the process, the way that we've worked together has helped you in, first of all, communicating and making the plan just visible to everyone. And then secondly, executing to that plan.
Sure. So the way that we kind of operated our DEI partnership with OurOffice was we formed a committee at our firm that's representative of all groups of people in the firm. So it's got partners, associates, staff members, obviously our HR team as well. And then we worked with OurOffice to create our DEI plan using their surveys and questionnaires. And there's like kind of a process where they meet with smaller groups in our firm, and they kind of help us formulate our action plan, like what's our most important kind of goals to do with the plan. And then we, underneath the goals, we have each like kind of action item that is supposed to be in furtherance of those goals. We spent a lot of time on that part of it, which I thought was really helpful and really important to do. That's less on the technology side, but it's certainly once we had that, it was like, okay, so we have this great plan and this great tool that we have. How do we let everybody know what it is? Because not everybody participated in that process, or they participated at different levels, right? So the platform, we put the plan on the platform and we invite everybody to join the platform. And so they can see what the goals are, they can see what the action items are, and they can periodically check in on progress on those action items. And those action items have actual progress bars, like, oh, it's 20% complete, it's 90% complete. So I think that's really wonderful to see as a member of the organization. And we also, just because there's obviously different levels of engagement, people might be checking in on that if it's really important to them, or they might be kind of sitting back and waiting for information to come to them. Everybody's different, right? So our committee meets once a month with our DEI advisor from our office. And then we go through the actions at the meeting. We talk about what, the status and what level of completion we're at. And then we actually provide a summary of those action items and their progress through the platform after those meetings. So it's just been a really wonderful tool to communicate both the plan and then the progress. I think the progress is probably really key, just to let people know that, it's not just lip service. Like we are actively doing things month by month to make progress towards our goals.
Yeah, and that's so important, isn't it? I mean, people a lot of times, there's statements made, there's information on a website, but the team members, they just don't know every day. I talk every day to companies, different kind of organizations, and that actually have a lot of great stuff going on, but nobody knows about it. People just know what you tell them or what you make available to them, right? So I think the access to that is really a great thing to do, however you do it, right? There's different ways. Sometimes people have other, tools, project management tools, Asana, or, others. There's many others that are available. And for some reason, they don't use it for their D&I effort, right? We think that's super important. And it's also super important to give everybody an opportunity to actually be able to contribute to it. So sometimes, not just be a passive kind of consumer of, and that's good to start with, just making everybody aware and everybody kind of having access to it. But the next step really, and even better, is when they have an opportunity to say, I could take an action, even if it's a micro action towards this. And then everybody else becoming aware that, oh, there's all this good activity going on. We found over the years that just generates so much goodwill and just a great sense of pride in people that our company is serious about what they are saying about the workplace culture, just as they are about the financial goals or other types of business performance goals. So thank you for sharing your process in detail about how it's it succeeds, because really a tool is one part of it, but it's really how you in any business transformation process, right, is how you have chosen to actually operationalize it and put a team around it as well. Stephanie, would you like to add? I know that you have also been just through that stage of the D&I planning and getting it onto the platform and so on.
Yeah, I would amplify the transparency piece has been key. You can do all these great things in a vacuum, and if your employees don't see it, it didn't actually happen. So when we're talking about culture, they need to know, right? So I think transparency of the tools, the visual kind of nature of the dashboard has been really useful for that. The other piece around planning, I thought the actual planning process with my consultant, my representative, was really useful because it allowed us, we're a remote company, we've got people all over the place, right? So for us, having one place to kind of talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion is really key, but making sure that that place isn't just talking about a slice of that, but that it's, enveloped in our business objectives. What are we trying to achieve as a company, and how does DE&I impact that and, layer up to that? I think the process itself was really useful to figure out what are our goals even, what should we be tracking? And then obviously showing our progress against those goals has been really key. And it's also given us a lot of talking points, a lot of things to celebrate as a company, right? Like it's given us opportunities to say, man, we're doing really good work. So all of that's been really key to building the culture here.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. You know, when I'll just share a little piece of my own background too. As some of you know, I had a DEI leadership role back in those days in the early, it was 2010 timeframe. They kind of tapped you on the shoulder most of the time. It was a second job, a volunteer kind of thing. It still is in many companies, but it was much more prevalent then, where it was almost always a volunteer kind of another job you took on. So I was asked to lead that for at a major corporation, and frankly, one of the biggest problems was, you know, every quarter we had to report to the board, you know, about what we're doing around this, and it was just really going around and asking everybody what they were doing. So it would take us about a week just to go around and ask everybody. We had worldwide operations, and this was an objective that had, you know, come down from the board, and we were all focused on it. But you know, it was just so hard just to gather everything. And every quarter we said, oh yay, there's all this great stuff going on. And we were encouraged, and we would talk about it. And then after the board meeting, you know, everybody, you know, went up, and of course people were still doing things, but during the quarter, you know, as we were going on a day-to-day basis, frankly, no one had a sense of how it was going until it was reporting time again. So I think what you point out about the transparency and just the kind of what it creates, the kind of energy it creates in the organization is really important. Since I have you talking about this anyway, I do want to move to the second big thing, which is just engaging everyone, right? And you know, to hear from everyone, you know, personally, and just this voice of employees that we all talk about. Can you speak a little bit about how you know, this technology actually has helped you provide a psychologically safe environment, especially because you are in a hybrid mode, and a lot of your people are remote. And then, you know, once you provide the psychological safety to hear from them, how does it also help encourage, you know, engagement by everyone to contribute personally? Because at the end of the day, it is also about personal accountability if you're going to have business transformation and kind of a more inclusive and equitable culture.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, giving employees the space to express themselves and let them know that that's okay and we want it is really important. So the tool has the culture app, which is, I think of it kind of like as a Facebook feed or a social media feed, where people can kind of say, hey, this is something that's important to me. They can do this anonymously or not. We found everyone here, no one has posted anonymously. Everyone feels safe enough to say what's going on with them. It's not just a place for, you know, employees to express themselves, but we will then take some of those conversations that we see happening and we'll pull them into a listening group where we come together on a monthly basis, and we invite everyone to come and talk about some really tough things. You know, this started in a lot of companies in 2020, and it's something that, I mean, every time I leave one of those listening groups, I'm sweating a little bit because I'm like, man, that was like, we're towing the line here, because it can be uncomfortable. But to see the number of employees attendance grow each month is really a sign and an indication of how important these conversations are. And, you know, if you're not talking about them, they're still happening. So I think for psychological safety, you have to be willing to allow these conversations to happen, right? You have to be supportive of a space for people to talk about what they believe in, and you have to make sure that you are encouraging that. So we also have our C-suite posting on that, right? Some really personal and vulnerable sort of things. And it's, you know, reassuring to employees to see that this is something that everyone deals with, right? I think it's all about bringing your whole self to work, right? We don't want people to feel that there's a work self and a like real self. We want everyone to kind of feel comfortable here. Again, being remote, I do laundry sometimes in the middle of the day, and that's just, I'm a real person. Things are going on, and that doesn't mean I'm less productive. That doesn't mean that I'm not thinking about work, but we want people to not try to hide parts of themselves. And that culture app has been really useful in doing in creating a psychologically safe environment. And we make sure always to tie that into our other town halls where we're talking about business. We always do a DE&I update, and not just to remind people that it's important, but to talk about, hey, this listening group, we talked about X, Y, and Z. and to watch employees grow and learn and to kind of join those things and have their camera off at first, and then their camera comes on, and then the next one they finally say something, right? Watching that progression's been really, really cool to see.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks again for sharing that also, especially about your C-suite. You know, we have seen now consistently. We used to notice this early, you know, when the platform was first operational back in 2019, and would see these spikes, you know, and would wonder what are these spikes in engagement, you know, and we pretty soon were able to correlate that with executive engagement at those in those organizations. And what would happen is not only it would spike, but it would have a tail. In other words, it would go on for a good week or two at a higher level of engagement, and then would settle at that higher level of engagement. So every time you did this, you know, we started calling it the CEO effect or the C-suite effect, you know, where that kind of engagement, and it can be as simple as just a quick sharing of a personal experience while someone is sitting at an airport, you know, just waiting for a flight or waiting maybe for a doctor's appointment or whatever it is, you know, and taking just really a couple of minutes to do that on their cell phone. Or it can be just a reaction or a response to somebody else posting. So all of those things, they just show that you know, the C-suite is sincere, really cares, is vulnerable. They're also humans, and that just creates a totally different energy. Mark, you've been patient, and I know you have a lot of stories to tell. So in your years, what would you like to add?
No, I mean, I think we've seen the benefit of having that cultural app, providing a safe place for engagement. You know, we've seen different examples. I think one that comes to mind particularly is one where, you know, we had an employee take this opportunity to share in a space about, hey, why doesn't AM General have benefit programs that benefit maybe domestic partners, same-sex partners? You know, where is AM General on these issues? Because we don't see it. And, you know, before this would have been maybe a one-on-one interaction. Maybe they would have called their HR person. The HR person would have given their answer. But with this forum, one, it allowed the person to raise the issue in an environment they felt safe. And it allowed us as a company then to help educate or make people aware that we do have these programs. We do have these benefits. You know, it would have been something maybe we didn't think about communicating across the organization. But, you know, just having this forum allowed us to not only for the person to express questions or concerns, but also give an answer or feedback that I think, you know, whether it was something the person was interested or not, it was something now everybody knew or made awareness across the organization that this was something that was on people's minds, employees' minds, and also the company's mind as well, as far as, you know, providing that as a benefit. So it was kind of a great way to get some information shared and awareness where otherwise you wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. If I remember correctly, it was I think the first of one of the very few anonymous posts we've had across the platform. As you know, as we were talking about earlier, most people don't post anonymously, actually, even though there is that possibility. But once in a while, when there's a need, I remember you sharing with us, you know, the conversations, the process you went through as a leadership team, and then the reaction, not just from that employee, but the rest of the employees, was quite transformational. I think for your culture, if I may add to your story, because it's really a story that's very near and dear to my heart, and it really proves the power of this kind of capability, which, again, it's not any one thing, right? There's no silver bullet. We always say this, there's just many things that you have to employ. The other side of it is also for onboarding. You know, a lot of times, especially now that a lot of people are just onboarded, higher than onboarded remotely, we find across different type of organizations where it's really been helpful for them when somebody comes on board and they put it, you know, they include it in their onboarding training and the materials that they share when an employee first joins. And I think you do that as well yourself, Mark, and they, so that, you know, there's a place to go. There's like a virtual town hall where they can go and they can share and not feel so lonely, you know, that especially the first few days. Anything else anyone wants to add to that? Kelly, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that. So we also have, you know, increased participation on the platform. I would say a majority of the comments are posted not anonymously, and they're mostly kind of celebratory, which can be great for culture. we did have, I'll share kind of a story about, we did have one anonymous posting regarding Juneteenth, and it actually was posted. So we happened to have a DEI committee meeting the day before Juneteenth, and it was posted shortly before the meeting. And while we were in the meeting, and it was anonymous, and the posting was something along the lines of, should the firm give Juneteenth off as a holiday? We had not addressed it. I think it was not something that was just top of mind. And it only recently became a federal holiday. And so while we were in the meeting, there was some very interesting anonymous dialogue going on the post. I think it was like 4 or 5 comments. Some, I would call it negative. It was kind of, if they don't do that, then all of this means nothing. So, comments of that nature. And I think it was very, I raised it in the meeting because I was watching it happen, and I thought, oh, like this is something we have to talk about. And I thought it was very enlightening, and I thought it was a good opportunity for us to provide a response, and we did. And we did end up giving the holiday off. It was certainly not our intention to not provide that holiday off. But we also had this opportunity to be vulnerable and say, hey, we made a mistake, because we should have been thinking about this. It should have been more top of mind. And I thought that was, it was a great example of use of the platform in an anonymous manner to bring things to light that were important to people at our organization.
Yeah, that just goes to say, my own experience is, and that's why it's so rewarding in the work that we do, is that none of this is intentional. Most people, most leaders want to be good leaders. They aspire to be great leaders, right? We all have been there, and yet we only know what we know, right? I used to rely on I had a great EA, who would come and tell me the gossip, tell me what was really going on, right? And I remember when there was a transition and someone else came on board, I just wish, and they weren't as in tune with what was going on the floor. And I so missed my EA, because that was my only way of knowing what's really going on, right? And in this day and age where, again, there's hybrid, there's some remote work, there's just so much more diversity in the workforce. You look at it even generationally, it's the first time where generationally over half of the workforce is millennials and Gen Zers, and they are majority diverse themselves as a population. And in a few short years, they're going to constitute 75% of the workforce. And most of us who are in positions of leadership, Gen Xers or baby boomers, just may not be aware of what's important to this newer generation. And so it's just so important, this ability to be aware, of what's just going on. To your credit and your leadership's credit, I must say we were just amazed at the speed with which your leadership decided to react. I believe it was the same day, maybe later that day at the end of the day. And it really was it was a big decision, and it really affected, I think, again, very positively your organization. So we've talked about, obviously, the importance of planning, the importance of engaging everyone, transparency, communication, hearing from everyone and engaging them, also personally in contributing. One thing that everybody, of course, always talks about is, well, but how are we doing after we do all of this? How are we really doing? I talked to countless leaders at actually great organizations that win the awards, and sometimes, there's just basic measurements, but they only go so far, right? So they say we got to a certain point, we measured representation or compensation gaps and so on. But what else can we measure beyond that, right? And so, like everything else, it's a journey, and you evolve. And so, measuring is extremely important, both to celebrate and show the outcome and the ROI, but also to make adjustments and course corrections if needed. Mark, you've had wealth of data, obviously, on using this technology, and I want to start with you and ask you, how has technology helped you, one, in just figuring out what to measure, and two, connecting the dots to drive appropriate actions or adjustments to get better results as you go?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as a manufacturer, I think using technology to manage the business is fundamental to what we do, whether it's driving smart technology into our factories and so forth. And so what I think we've been behind is from a people perspective, we haven't had a ability to really kind of integrate, to your point, a lot of stagnant data into something that's useful that we can use to manage the business. And so you have it in different pieces. It's hard to get at. I think one of the great things we've gotten with our office solution is a way to integrate that to help us manage the business. I mean, it's easy for us to run a report that says, how many of this do we have? How many males do we have? How many females? But that's only a starting point. So for example, about how we use it in every day, as far as how we help manage our actions and drive focus and see results. Being a manufacturer defense industry, you'll know it's predominantly a male-dominated environment. And so as we look at, for example, just as pure numbers, one of our initiatives is, okay, what can we do, or what are we doing to improve opportunities for bringing females in the organization or women in the organization? That's a starting point, but it doesn't really tell you, what to do. And so one of the things we did and we're able to do with the tool is, so you look at a staffing process from where am I getting candidates to, okay, how many of those candidates are weeding through to selection for interviews, and of the interviews, how many are making through to an offer, and of the offer, how many are actually getting hired. And so we've been able to use those analytics to kind of see, okay, where at those gates are we not experiencing the numbers we'd expect to experience? And what was interesting is the audit, kind of knee-jerk reaction is, well, you're just not hiring enough, or you're not making enough offers. And so what we were able to do by going through the analytics was say, no, actually, the selection process of getting interviews in, the numbers were very representative of where they need to be. The offers and acceptance, very well where it needs to be. What we found from the analytics was that our initial pipelining and sourcing of female applicants across different segments of the business was way below where it should be based on census information. So, from a business, what that does, it helps us say, okay, what are our sourcing activities? Do we need to change the way we source? What's our branding activity? How are we viewed externally as an organization for women? Do we have the right policies or benefits that are supportive of that? So, just using that tool took a very, what would seem to be a straightforward question, how do we get more females in the organization? But it allowed us to really dive into and find areas where we could focus efforts and make, find the root cause and make a difference.
Yeah, it's really finding that root cause, and you make such a great point. And we've had examples where people have also found, for example, between their performance ratings and just looking at different representations of people, different parts of the organization, and then their promotions, and finding a disconnect where, again, not intentional, part of that unconscious bias that sometimes we all have, or just not having the awareness, which on its own, really there's almost nowhere where we see some edicted, like requirements put in place, unless it's some kind of external requirement. But internally, we don't even necessarily encourage that in most cases, to put any specific mandates out there, but just to have awareness and kind of see where your gaps might be, where the opportunities might be. And in those cases, it's kind of self-correcting. We found that really in almost all cases, it's just enough for the leadership to be aware of where some of those gaps might be. And it does take some looking at the data a little bit with more more closely and more broadly, also across different types of measures. Stephanie, I know that you're also using the data as well and you've just started to do some of that just due to your how recently you got on the platform. How do you see that helping your organization?
Yeah, I'm excited to get to the place that Mark's at with the funnel there and being able to identify all that. The more data you put into the tool, right, the easier the insights come. But I would say right now for us, it's been about identifying the gaps, which is what is the immediate area, bringing awareness to the C-suite. And for example, we're a tech company, so one sort of use case I can think of is the representation of female engineers, right? It's kind of a well-known thing. It's something we struggled with here. So we were able to actually see that, put some numbers behind it, compare it to other companies, compare it to other departments, not just where the representation was as a whole, but by level. And that really helped us to get very granular in how we wanted to attack that problem. And what we did was twofold. We not only thought about, let's amp up our diverse pipeline. We got to get more people in here. We need to find access to more female engineers, but we also utilized those that were in the organization, and we invited them to every interview panel, some of which had never interviewed anyone before, right? So it was twofold. It was a growth opportunity for them and an opportunity for some of the people who are used to doing those interviews in a very technical way to hear a different point of view around, hey, this person didn't let me talk. That whole interview, I'm interviewing them and I didn't get to say anything. So just little things like that led to a better review process, a better interview process. And from there, now that we've got talent in seat, it's about how do we groom and grow these folks and these individuals. And we're not quite there yet. That's kind of on the horizon. But what's come from that now is, what's the easiest way to grow with a company that's 400 people and we don't have a bunch of internships and things in place? Let's get some internship programs. Let's get people connected to people outside of engineering. So the tool has helped us to take a representation problem, look at it from a lot of different angles, come up with a lot of really creative things. And it's kind of like, let's see what works, let's see what helps. And we can be really smart in how we take those actions, and they're not that hard to do. So it takes a complex problem that kind of breaks it down.
Yeah, I love that you talk about leveraging your own employees, female employees, for example, in some of those interviews. We on the platform, there's also a groups capability. A lot of companies have ERGs, different kind of affinity groups or employee resource groups or business resource groups, as they're referred to. And we actually highly encourage leveraging the ERGs or the BRGs. They want to help, right? I mean, they obviously, as a community, whether it's a ERG or a group around females, women kind of topics, or people of color, whatever it is, they also want to contribute to the organization, and that helps them grow. It helps them contribute and be part of it. And so, and because of the ways that you can also, with technology, you can also link an action, or you can link a specific KPI or a key performance indicator with an ERG and kind of say, hey, take ownership of this, empower them to actually affect those analytics, affect that action, be part of making, executing on that action. So there's just many ways. I think these are just like, it's, if you will, DEI 3.0, or, we had DEI 1.0, and then now in the recent times we've had DEI 2.0. I think this is really DEI 3.0, where, we're talking about taking it to the next level and really applying business processes that we would apply to improving safety or quality or any of these things that, over time in the recent decades have come to be managed more actively and intentionally with data and with, just the kind of capabilities that we're talking about. I also want to mention something else. There's a question, actually, a good question that has come up on the Q&A here. How often do you all find that, you, in terms of the reporting on the data to your organization as a whole, and what channels do you use to share some of that data? Not all of you at once.
I'll jump in here. We look at it monthly, high level, and we use the dashboard in the actual OurOffice tool as a great place. Also, your team does a wonderful job of pulling insights and highlights into those monthly reports. That's been really helpful and concise to share with executive team, leadership, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a monthly cadence for us, not on everything, but on the high level, big 4 or 5 things. Is useful. I would say quarterly if you're really tracking something that takes some time to take off.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, I mean, there is a dashboard. The dashboard not only has the data, but also insights added and so on. It can be done on a monthly basis or however often you like. So it in itself is a way, as a channel for people to go on there and check it. But do you use, any of you, do you use other ways of just broadly communicating your, some of the data and how the analytics are evolving?
I would say from our perspective, to give maybe some comments back to Stephanie on the process. So that's an area, like, for example, we have some internal reviews quarterly. We have a D&I council executive reviews. For us, that's kind of the next, I would say, evolution of our maturity, is creating more transparency by pushing that information out more across the organization. So, I appreciate the feedback from the other panelists, because it just keeps reinforcing how, we're still got ways to go. I mean, we'll still have things that we can do to improve. And I think the data transmission, the question about that's a very great point. And the more we can do that, the more transparency you get in people, the more trust you'll build in kind of what you're doing. So that's the next phase for us, I think, as we look to mature this.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Mark. Again, I think it's one of those things. I happen to know your leadership actually loves to communicate, and you're very transparent in general. But it's really the history of each industry or each company, just the lived experiences of the leadership. A lot of us grew up, I come from a background of working in an industry where it was very much of a need to know industry, right? And so it wasn't, we just generally, it wasn't like tech. In tech, there's a lot of openness and there's a lot of data sharing. So I want to just mention that, because I really also advocate for leaders not beating themselves up too much for where they start or how, the pace at which they're able to improve. At the end of the day, we provide industry benchmark, of course, best in class, and so on by industry, because it's so important to look at it by industry and also in your size, because a smaller company, under 1,000 employees, small, medium versus, much larger organization, the dynamics are different, the resources are different. We, for the first time, we decided to do a survey just on small, medium businesses, and publish some of the results earlier this year, and we'll continue to do that annually, because we think it's very important to look at your peers in your industry. You can actually get some adverse effects if you look at, if you Google something or look at, what the people are doing in an entirely different industry or even region. And just where your company's journey has been. It is very important on data. I also want to mention the importance of access. Just because there's data, it doesn't mean that it should be shared with everyone at all times, right? There are obviously some privacy laws and different things, and it is important to control who sees the data. So the privacy settings are quite important. Even though we have the anonymity capability, for example, in our technology, we also provide for, role-based access and privacy settings and who you share it with. You can keep certain things completely private. You can share it with a few people. You can share it with everyone. So I think those are very important when people are thinking of technology. Whatever technology tool they're looking at, is to really inform themselves about the controls that are put in there. This is not the same, especially in a B2B, business enterprise software compared to, B2C consumer software. I think that has other rules and things that also apply to it. But I think you have to be really mindful of that. And when you have data, I also wonder how, if any of you are using goal setting or the collaboration capabilities, like you can, comment to in our technology, you can comment to different kinds of charts or analytics on actions. You can collaborate. So there's a lot of collaboration capabilities built into the platform, which we think again is really important. But I wonder how important you think it is as you go forward, how you might leverage that. Anyone want to speak to that a little bit? I mean, like, is it, when you set goals, how do you do you set goals on a regular basis? Or is it just, you let it, you kind of look for an upward trend primarily? I think it's mostly for Mark and Stephanie, because I know, Kelly, you're just getting started on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, to your point, the environment that we definitely set goals and objective through our director of D&I and our council and their access to our C-suite. We establish a path forward of where we want to be moving to. Again, I think where we continue to kind of have to grow and develop is making that more aware and accessible across the organization. So that there's really a lot of visibility into the path we're taking, because everybody, we get this quite a bit from folks as even though we're kind of, we've been on this journey and made a lot of progress, we still get a lot of comments. People like, well, you haven't done enough, or you're not far enough. And I does think it speaks a little bit to a culture of continuous improvement, but I think the more we're able to kind of provide that level of information, I think it reassures people the progress and steps we are taking. Because I think it was Kelly or Stephanie made the point, like, if you're not telling your people, they're not seeing it. And we, from our perspective, I think that's something we've got to continue to improve upon.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is a journey. It's not a sprint. Yeah, that is an important aspect of it. One last thing, as I see that, this is such a great conversation, we could probably go on for another hour, but I want to make sure that we end on top of the hour. So the last key topic that I really would love to have your feedback on this is, the importance of having the human touch, the human guidance and support. Again, I'm an engineer. I love technology, but I'm also the first one to, as a consumer of it and also as a provider of it now, to really recognize the importance of expertise and support when you are using technology. And again, as you're looking at different tools, as our audience who's tuned in today might be already using some tools. There was a question earlier on that I know was answered as we were talking in terms of, just engaging everyone, because it's yet another tool. We always hear this, right? But it's important to be intentional about your workplace culture. And in fact, it says something that you do have a tool for that as well as other things. We integrate as much as we can with all the other key tools in HR and applicant tracking and so on. But it is, to me, it's always extremely important. That's why we have DEI advisors that support, that are dedicated to each of our customers. Can you speak to the role of your DEI advisor and other people, within your organization, just the human touch, the human guidance, the human support to make, because, we've talked a lot about the capabilities of the technology. I don't want anybody to leave thinking that, oh, good, I can just buy a piece of technology, check the box, and I'm good. It does take human involvement and engagement. So would you like to speak to that? I know, Kelly, you have some things maybe you'd like to share.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think our DEI advisors are critical to our success with the platform. They attend our monthly meetings, and that story I shared about the Juneteenth post, for example, it was our DEI advisor who, suggested to our leadership that in our response that we kind of highlight the fact that we made a mistake, because it was, that's something we acknowledged in the room, but not necessarily something we might put in the communication back. And I think that really went such a long way in how it was perceived in our organization. And I just thought that was like a really, really helpful comment. And then, more recently, we had sort of a DEI related incident, and, we were able to kind of consult with our DEI advisors on just a very personal, level, and just have them give us advice on how to address it. And it's great, because it's not, I think that was maybe one of my concerns about going with a technology platform for DEI was like, well, you can't put things into a software and just spit out DEI, right? Like that's not how this works. It's a very human thing that needs to happen, and it's you know, a lot of hand-holding and education around it, which we have, you know, had a tremendous support from the OurOffice team.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's important to have some experience and expertise, right? I mean, these are cases, you know, this topic is sensitive, it's emotional. A lot of times people can, you know, have different kind of perspectives, and you want to have someone who's been there, done that, or maybe talk, you know, and especially with our DNI advisors, you know, they have usually several different kinds of organizations they've worked with. And so, and if they haven't had that personal experience, they always have a network of other DNI advisors that they can reach out to. So it's important to somehow access that kind of capability to make sure that when those things, because when these things happen too, it's like, you know, it's immediate, right? I mean, you don't have time to go and research and see if you could go hire yourself a consultant or, you know, whatever, or somebody who knows maybe how to address it. It's like now, and people expect in today's world, everybody expects a reaction, everybody expects something to happen, you know, almost right away. So that access, I think, is very important. We do have on the Q&A a question that I wonder if any of you would like to address is, how are you seeing your employees beyond, you know, the DNI Council engage on the platform and contribute to progress?
I can hop in here quickly. I would say, and kind of going along with what Kelly was just talking about, that culture app piece has been key to watch people talk about, but our listening groups, those meetings we have where we have every employee in the room talking about specific issues, have really been what's amplified our entire DE&I strategy. I think also from there, you kind of have to have, someone looking at it and managing it and pushing it forward. We have a great facilitator of those listening groups, but we also have to have those cultural superstars, those people that are embedded in the organization who care about this stuff. You got to figure out who are those people, invite them to be a part of this. It can't just be a group of 5 people always. Who are the other people that maybe don't have the time, effort, or expertise every month to meet, but can, you know, host one of those listening groups, who come from a diverse background that want to share. So for us, I think the app has been really useful, but the listening groups have been key in us identifying who those people in the broader organization are, and then bringing them, you know, to the front.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And one thing I want to mention is this, you know, the way that this type of technology, you know, in our implementation is very different from regular social media, right? And we all know the ills of social media is that we designed it in a way that would be, you know, would protect for some of the ills of social media. And one of those things is that, you know, in terms of engagement, you know, we don't really advocate that everybody should be engaged all the time on this, and you should look at these kind of a little bit this feel good kind of stats of how many are on the platform, because people have work to do. I mean, you're in a workplace environment, you know, and you want people to be mostly, you know, working in their jobs. But what's really important, what we watch for, and from day one, this has been the case, is that we know now with a lot of data, it is where people come to share when they don't find, you know, some other outlet or another way. It's part of pieces of the puzzle, you know, it's a very key, very important one to provide that. And oftentimes we see, for example, if you have 20% female or you have 10% people of color, that the representation on the platform is significantly higher. So you have 40% of the people on the platform are women instead of 20% across the population, or you have 25% people of color involved compared to the overall population. Now, offering their kind of diversity, if you will, that they're a person of color or they're a woman or a veteran or disabled, all of those dimensions, there's 7 dimensions, is actually done on the platform as they wish to do it. You know, it's kind of optional, and it's up to the person to share that. It's anonymously aggregated. Nobody can see that data but themselves, and then it's anonymously aggregated. So it really actually is that's what you want to look for versus, you know, just broad engagement. I do want to, in our last minute, to, as I promised, I want to thank, first of all, our panelists. This has been an amazing conversation. We could go on a lot more, but I also want to, as I had promised, to put up the recertification, credits here that people can take advantage of for getting your credits with SHRM and HRCI. And once I have that up there, the last 30 seconds, anything that Mark, Kelly, or Stephanie, y'all would like to add, just words of encouragement to those who are the practitioners out there. Stephanie, would you like to say a word?
Sure. I saw Mark unmute though. I think he wants to say something.
No,
Okay.
no, go right ahead.
We have 30 seconds.
Yep, go ahead.
So I would say this is a really important thing, and it's not as hard as you might imagine. And there's a lot of people that are going to want to be a part of it. You just got to figure out who they are. So break down the silos, get started, and get that advisor. That's been key to our success to help hold our hand along the way.
Awesome. Mark?
No, I would just say learning from everybody here. I think the thing is, don't feel you have to be perfect. You just have to get started, leverage the information, leverage technology, and keep moving forward. You're going to get better every day at it, and you're going to learn something new every day.
Awesome. And Kelly?
I would kind of add more of the same. It feels like this very daunting thing because it is really a marathon, not a sprint, but you just have to start one step at a time.
Thanks again, everyone. It's a pleasure every day working with all of you and everyone out there. As they said, just keep at it. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.